question from, this is the Instagram channel. So if you guys want to ask questions, you can log on to your phone. Go to my Instagram page, Strong by Science. You can join the channel, the place where I share cool things. And I'll occasionally add in, what do you want me to talk about? And the thing that gets the most votes, I will make a video about. Today, the conversation, well, I guess the initial question was, how do you organize skill development over a long time period? So basically, more times than not, people think of skill development, they think of one session, but how do you actually organize that over a large period of time to get better at something? This is a really good question, and to tag along to that question, they also ask, is there some structure or periodization model to go with it? Periodization, basically just meaning that, is there some organized structure that goes from A to B to C to D and so on until you get your end result? So there are kind of two schools of thought I have in regards to this, and it's really dependent on the person. When I encounter athletes, for the most part, there seem to be two types of athletes. There's the athlete that thinks about everything. There's the athlete that doesn't think about anything. They have their pros and cons. The very thoughtful, analytical athlete typically has well-structured, well-organized aspects to their routine, and the free-for-all athlete is someone you'd be like, oh, that's a natural. Obviously, it operates on a spectrum, but this is just easy grouping. And this is really important why I start off with this, because it's gonna change how we organize stuff. The athlete who is just free-flowing and free-going typically picks up skills really fast and can implement them into the game really quickly. So that's someone who, when I teach them something, I really want to make sure that they have a lot of freedom in their structure and how they do that movement. So for an example is, let's say we're learning a step back. I might show them the step back. Maybe I'll show them me doing one. Maybe I'll show them a couple videos of other athletes doing it. And then I'll kind of let them pick and decide how they want to do it. And then essentially they'll make their own little step back pretty quickly, and you just kind of stick it into the games and start to see whether or not they use it. Some athletes like this are just blessed. Let me give you an example. I've worked with an athlete where they would watch a video of a move, and then they would be able to do that move in a game. Like, I can't do that, but they could. Blown away by it. The thinking athlete, which is kind of, I think, the majority of people out there, have to learn the movements, and then they have to learn how to use the movement. And there's two breakdown things here. One, when you learn a movement, are you actually physically able to do the movement? So am I physically strong enough to do a step back, but I just don't do it? Or am I just not physically strong enough to do the movement, so I need to get stronger and then I can do it? That's going to affect your periodization and training program, because if you're not strong enough to do a Euro step, you need to get stronger before you can do a Euro step. So your initial stages are to build that single leg strength. If you do a skill and you're plenty strong, but you just can't do it, we have to figure out why this happens. And when it comes to skill, a lot of times skill comes from quantum leaps, like, oh, one big jump into the next. They rarely kind of do something right and then kind of do more something right, and then eventually do it perfectly. It's like, oh, I can't really do it, I can't really do it. Oh, one day that makes total sense. So we're constantly trying to find a way for the body and brain to solve this problem. So with someone who's a thinker and someone who gets inhibited a lot by themselves, they think about it, they overly process it, so on and so forth. There's kind of two genres of that person. There's one person who might think a lot about it, but they don't care if they make mistakes. They're just constantly trying to be perfect. And then there's the thinker who gets really upset with their mistakes. So if we get upset with our mistakes and we're trying to learn a new move, by default, if we get mad at ourselves when we learn a new move, we'll never do that move because we've never done that move before, and we'll always get mad at ourselves, and we're stuck in this loop of not getting better. So first off, we have to understand why we're doing the drill. So instead of saying, hey, we're going to do a step back three-pointer, and that athlete's concerned about making it, and the success of that drill is dependent on whether they make it or not, we just say the success of the drill is dependent on whether or not they actually do the step back. I don't care if it goes in or not, I just want you to practice the step back. So in my first order of structure, it's let's see if we can actually do the movement. Do I need to teach them it, the footwork? Do I need to practice the timing and rhythm of it? And all that structure has to go into how that athlete learns. But the very first step is to see whether or not they can do the movement. And then from there, I simply like to add in layers of competition. Can they do that movement when we're doing a drill and I don't necessarily say we have to do that movement? For example, we might say, do a crossover at the cone and get into a shot. Oh, are they working on that step back there intuitively, naturally, kind of trying to work on it? Or do I need to say, hey, make sure you shoot the step back jump shot on the cone? So we kind of force it into a less isolated fashion. So basically we take this movement and then our stepping stones have to do with how much chaos and randomness we throw at it. So less and less and less structure, more and more comfortability using it, and we progress that way. Some athletes can take that very, very easy step back, that natural athlete I talked about, the step back in the very beginning stages, and throw it straight into competition because they just don't care and they have extreme levels of confidence and motor skill. Other athletes are like, well, I don't really like that move, I'm not going to default to it. And that's when we got to keep pushing them and reminding them to try it. An example would be, we might do a drill where you have to score shooting a step back, no matter what. So we have forced application of a skill. In this situation, the constraint and success of the drill is dependent on whether or not they do that specific movement. So it's not whether or not you can score a ball, but it's whether or not you can score off of a step back jump shot. Again, we progressively add some chaos into this. And then I think the last stage which people miss, and this is the really important one, is doing this in a competitive setting without competitive repercussions. So in pickup basketball, in settings where you're playing against people where you're trying to win, but not in a situation where you're trying to win playing time. People often can do the skill, they express the skill in semi-competitive side groups, but when they get into a game, they get reserved again. Instead, let's find lesser competition you know you can dominate if you need to, and then you go and practice that skill you're not very good at, so then you can express it against a 5-on-5 setting, so then you have the feeling of what it's like to actually use that skill in an absolute competitive environment. And then eventually you just have to take it to the point where you know that skill is what you're good at, you know it's how you can score, and now it's become part of your game. Then when you develop new skills, this is a little bit of a caveat, and we'll keep this really short, I like to try to think about new skills that branch off of other skills, so complementary skills. So instead of trying to learn 4 different step back moves, let's learn 1 step back, get comfortable with it, and then off of that, we're going to develop counters. This counter, that counter, counter off of a counter. That way your game becomes very complementary. It's no longer about thinking about what move you want to do, but it's now just doing a move and reacting to what is happening in front of you. Because if they stop that move, what's my next move? And they all roll one into the next, and eventually you develop your kind of game. So I really encourage people, if we're trying to develop skills, if you're comfortable, take that new skill you learn and throw it right into the fire. Throw it into competition. If you're comfortable with that skill possibly letting you down, but knowing that's how you get better at it. The mindset is important, so understanding why you're doing something is critical, because if you understand why you're doing that in the competitive environment, then you don't get frustrated if you fail. So it's really, 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 really important to let yourself guide the athlete versus you mandating the athlete to do certain things, because at certain times the athlete will be able to take jumps or even little steps back if they need to, but they know quite well because they're learning it just like they would a language. You're there just to direct their momentum and help them get in the right way and put their body in situations to solve the confusing problem of how they move. But it's not necessarily you have to follow week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, because all of a sudden you might go for 3 weeks of struggling and week 4 you're just perfect. I've seen it happen before. Very odd, it's very interesting, but have some patience and then try different things out to help the athlete by talking to them and hearing what they feel, because sometimes you can have some advice and insights that might help elucidate what they're trying to express to you. Oh, I don't feel the rhythm, the step back, the timing here. Maybe you watch some videos, maybe they're more kinesthetic and they have to move to actually get the feel of it all. So I hope that makes sense. It's not a perfect example, but it does have some structure from controlled to least controlled, then from kind of competitive to really competitive, and it's that competitive leap that people really make the mistake. On top of that, you got to think about the speed of the movement. Are you actually doing it gain speed? That's like the biggest one. Are you actually doing it fast? And then imagining and envisioning against athletes. Are you doing it against somebody in your head? You actually see that defender. And it's realistic. It's not just like lazy dribbles and one explosive move. the whole movement itself is really game-like. So hope that helps. I appreciate y'all. Again, if you have questions, you can join the Instagram channel. That is where I share cool things. That's the name of the channel, because it's kind of where I share cool things. And you can ask questions, and hopefully they will, well, hopefully, maybe if they're get voted up high enough, I'll answer them. So I appreciate y'all, and I hope you enjoy it.